When it comes to financial planning, there's really 6 disciplines: investment planning, tax planning, retirement planning, estate planning, cash management, risk management. Sounds like a lot of stuff. Could be a couple-day seminar. So a lot of information. We can't really cover that all in one evening. I asked Shafik to share a couple of strategies and ideas with you tonight. Get his bio up here. And we can't really cover off everything, so he's just going to go through a few ideas and hopefully give you some insight into a couple of strategies. Shafik's one of our division directors, and he's also part of our senior executive financial advisor team in Alberta. He's been over 14 years with Investors Group. He's done over 100 seminars in the last year. So I was at a seminar of his last week at an oil company downtown, so he's always doing seminars. So he's very well versed at speaking. A couple of strategies he talks about are the psychology of wealth, so just trying to understand the psychology behind building wealth, and the third option, another strategy that he's term that he's coined. You may have seen him on the monthly show called Wealth Creation on Global TV. Also, he's received many awards at Investors Group. Top advisor in Alberta for the last 5 years, national division director for the past 4 years, also ranked in the top 1% of advisors in Canada. Please join me in welcoming Shafik Hirani.
Okay. Thanks. Can you guys hear me okay, or is this loud enough? Not loud enough yet? No? How about now? Okay? Are you taking notes already? Or are you doing the feedback evaluation? I'm just going to take my jacket off. I tend to sweat when I lie. Why are you here? It's not a mandated audience, is it? It's not a forced audience. Nobody forced you to be here, right? I think it's important when we talk, we understand that people have different modes of communication. And the question of why you're here is important because when you communicate, there's what's called an encoder and there's what's called a decoder. And the person listening, it's important that we frame and we understand why we make certain decisions. See, I starved when I first started. I've been in the industry since 1995. When I started, I mean, 1995 was like year of Lorena Bobbitt, year of O.J. Simpson. It's tough to build a clientele when you start. And so what I did is I went across Calgary primarily, and I would give presentations to senior centers. And I would speak at Confederation Park, and I would speak at some, and I don't know if you guys know anything about senior centers. It's like 80 to 20 girls to guys, and the guys don't want to come out to a seminar on financial planning. They're dating like 5 girls at once. So I would present to these senior centers, and what happened is one day a guy came in, sat front row, and the guy was like 250 pounds. He's huge. His name was Gerard, and he was wearing jeans, blue stubble. You know, he had blue jean jacket on, yellow boots. And he goes, Sharif, I want you to speak to my boys. And my name is Shafik. I'm not going to correct the guy. He was huge. And so I'm trying to build a clientele. This is 15 years ago. And I said, OK, fine. I'll go speak to your boys. When do you want me out? He goes, well, come out on Sunday. And I said, well, Sunday, OK, fine. So I said, OK, fine. I'm going to go. He goes, Shafik, I want you to show up at 7:30. Now, I'm not a morning person, but whatever. I'm trying to build a clientele. It's difficult to build a clientele when you first start in our industry. So I said, OK, I'm going to go out to Hannah, Alberta, 7:30 in the morning, drove out, brought my assistant, my wife, went up, showed up at Hannah, Alberta. We ended up walking in a room like this, completely concrete, no plugins for a computer, nothing, and 200 construction workers standing there. Gerard runs one of the biggest steel mills in Hannah. I don't know if you guys know anything about construction, but they tend to drink on Saturday nights. I brought like 6 donuts. And so he ended up becoming a very good client, and he taught me a lot of what I didn't know about how you attain a certain level of wealth. But I want to express my gratitude, first of all, to Brian. Like, the way Gerard introduced me is he goes, OK, everybody shut the bleep up. And then he goes, OK, guys, don't you do to this guy what you did to the last guy. And he goes, OK, money guy, you're up. And right before that, my assistant comes in, she's crying. I'm hiding behind the screen because I'm nervous as heck. And she goes, you know, these guys, I don't know if they're being honest. And I said, why? What's going on? She goes, well, read the registration list. And the first guy's registration, his name is Fred. I said, well, what's wrong, honey? There's nothing wrong with that. And she goes, well, read the next four. The next four were Betty, Wilma, Bam Bam, Pebbles. So, you know, it is tough to build a clientele. We're going to change a little bit of gears today, and I'm going to sort of talk a little bit. Oh, shoot, get my face off this thing. Yeah. How many people here heard of Pavlov? He won a Nobel Prize in 1895. He was testing glandular responses in dogs. Turns out that he comes out with a whole new paradigm shift in the way people financial plan, a whole new approach. And his, not just applying to planning, it applied to human psychology. He would test dogs. Dogs would salivate when they were fed. We've all heard the story. It came up with what's called classical conditioning. That was what's called stimulus response psychology. The reason I asked why are you here is because often, I don't know if you've ever been in the situation where you've like read a good book, or you've seen a good movie, or you've like seen a good presentation or something like that, reflected back 3 months later and you have done nothing that that book told you to. Anybody been in this situation? Sure. The problem is we're conditioned. We're conditioned to get some information and go back. And by the way, it's actually not a bad idea that you were taking notes. You know, I'll tell you, a lot of times you'll see an advisor, and the advisor will say, well, listen to what I'm saying. You know, those people, they don't understand how we communicate. The way we communicate is, if I'm going to say something, there's something called selective attention. Selective attention means everything I say, you're probably going to get about 50% of my message. Here's the problem. There's something on top of selective attention. Out of 50% of what I say, you're going to get, there's something called selective retention. Selective retention, that means you're going to retain 50% of what I say in the short term. You're going to retain 10% of that 50% of what you heard in the long term. The problem with that message is it gets even worse. There's something called selective perception. Whoops. Selective perception means that out of everything I say, it doesn't matter. What matters is why you are here. Because we tend to distort and change reality to suit our fragile ego. We all see the world through one set of lenses. We all see the world through one set of eyes, and we tend to change reality to suit our eyes, our comfort zone. And so to make any kind of change when it comes to investments and how do I get rich, it takes certain levels of awareness. And we guard our gates of change very, very tightly. We don't open them. They can only be opened from inside. When it comes to money, if we're going to make any change on how we actually get to a certain place financially, we have to develop certain attributes that we're not used to developing because we've been conditioned to protect ourselves from these attributes, like ego, like humility. I don't have an agenda. I don't like PowerPoint. I never have. The problem with PowerPoint is it conditions people. Go, get something out of it, walk away, you know, that was good, it resonated with me, or it didn't resonate with me. They're intelligent people. So I thought we could just chat and just treat it like a fireside chat. This is sort of our message. And I do want to thank Brian. Brian's been very humble. Brian is the regional director for Investors Group. Our company has 2 million clients. We have 5,000 advisors. Brian's branch, which I'm a part of, has about 100 to 150 staff, and he runs well over $1 billion. So the invitation to come up, Brian, thank you very much, to share the stage with somebody like Peter Drake, who's forgotten more about economics than I'll ever know, it's an honor. The message we're trying to make is that we might want to look at a paradigm shift in the way people think traditional investment advice works. There's been a lot of paradigms since a paradigm is what we believe, right? So there's always been paradigms, and there's always been shifts in every area. There's been shifts in psychology, like when Pavlov was discredited by Freud. There's shifts in technology, like splitting the atom. The Earth isn't flat anymore. Galileo said the Earth isn't. Copernicus said the Earth isn't the center of the universe. There's lots of paradigms. We wrote an article called "The Hypnosis of Financial Conditioning," and it's a really interesting article because it shows people how we tend to get conditioned to go towards middle class. We're in a world where your advisor is going to tell you to max out your RSPs and pay down your mortgage and tell you it's going to get to a certain level of affluence. We're in a world where the advisor says throw money into an RSP for 30 years, so when you cash it out, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. I don't want to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. Psychologists have a term, they call it a locus of control. A locus of control means that we as people have a desire for two things. We've got this desire to be controlled, and we have a desire to be out of control. When it comes to money, our belief in this paradigm shift about traditional financial planning is that people make the mistake of having what's called an external locus of control. External locus of control means most people think, you know what, I'm going to be happy if I get a pay raise. I'll be happy when my mortgage is paid off. I'll be happy if my investments don't go down in value. If you want to attain a level of happiness, you must shift that locus of control to what's called an internal locus of control. But it's easy to say. Like, it is easy to say, but a lot of us don't do it because we don't know how. After Pavlov, a guy comes along named Freud. Freud said, you know what, Pavlov, maybe things are wrong. This is around the 1930s. Freud said, you know how people make decisions? The problem is we're not really based on our conscious mind. The mind has something called an ego and a superego. And you know what? We have something called a subconscious. So if you take a look at an iceberg, in Freud's new theory replaced what's called classical conditioning or cognitive therapy, and he called it psychoanalysis. Freud said we have three aspects to our personality when it comes to how we decide and what motivates us to take certain actions. One is called our conscious mind, and the conscious mind is basically what we're aware of. The second is called the id, and the id is what motivates us. And in the id, there's something called, oops, sorry about that, sorry about my writing, I should have been a doctor for God's sakes. It's the subconscious. The three aspects of our personality, Freud said, is we have this ego in our conscious mind. This line here, which represents the water, is our superego. The superego's job in us is to protect us from reality. So Freud said, you know, when it comes to money, when it comes to how we act, when it comes to our health, when it comes to our relationships, the superego's job is to distort reality. So we're not as in touch with our subconscious mind as we think we are. Why? Because we got the superego. One of the things the superego does, is generate what's called defense mechanisms. The first step towards getting to a certain point of wealth is avoiding defense mechanisms like blame, justification, transference. It's a major change in the way we view how to invest and how to create wealth. We don't look externally. We have to start looking at the person in the mirror. We have to start looking internally. Here's the problem. The problem is the brain, this superego is designed wrong because our brain is designed to think very linearly. We think, okay, I'm here now, I want to get here, and I want to be rich. So it's all up here, isn't it? Like, I want to start here at point A, and I want to get here. And so this is my life. I start here, and I work towards this goal, and I work, and then 80% of people we know by our statistics that investors end up middle class. Nobody asks why. If 80% of people are starting at one point and trying to get to another point and ending up middle class, we must ask why, in my opinion. Here's our message. our message is that this paradigm has to create another shift. The idea is you must start here and work backwards. Anybody heard of Pythagoras? Shortest distance between 2 points? The brain is not designed to think linearly or holistically, but we know intuitively you can't build a puzzle without a picture of the box. You can't build a house without a foundation, a blueprint. What we need to do if we're going to set up is we need to look at our whole lives holistically. That's how you get to a certain level of wealth. But the problem is the brain is designed to make us fail. In 1969, when JFK put a guy on the moon, what he said is, he said, well, here's the Earth, here's the moon. I ain't going to just leave the Earth towards the moon, because if he's going to start with the moon's orbits and gravity and costs and work backwards. If he missed the moon by 10 meters, if he missed the takeoff by 10 meters, he missed the moon by 100,000 kilometers. And we live our lives this way. We're conditioned to. Little discrepancies take us way off path. The problem is we don't know how to make decisions. Here's our 2 typical decisions: yes or no, panic or chill. This is how we decide. The brain is designed to think this way. If we take a look at how the brain is designed, how many people here think that there is a physiological change, a physiological difference between the rich and the poor? How many people think that there's nothing different between the rich and the poor? How many people think that there is something physical? How many people would not put their hand up if their life depended on it? How many people think that there is a physiological difference between the rich and the poor in the mind? 30%, 40%? How many people think there's no difference? Wow. After Freud came another guy in 1935. They give the Nobel Prize to a guy named B.F. Skinner. After Skinner comes a guy named Carl Jung. But Skinner talked about, he was the first guy to introduce what's called neural mapping. Neural mapping is when they start putting what's called a fMRI. Anybody heard of functional magnetic resonance imaging tests? fMRI tests or stuff like that? They started doing that, and they started testing how people decide, how people make decisions. One of the aspects in the paradigm that we try to stress is that you have to learn how to get into the right frame of mind. So if you take a look at how our brain is designed, the brain is broken up into 4 basic quadrants. There's a right and a left. There's a parietal lobe. Let's just call this a right, left, a front, and a back. So if you take a look at the left side of the brain does different stuff than the right side of the brain. This is important because a lot of people don't understand how we come to decisions and why we make these decisions. On the left side of the brain, it does stuff like math, and logic, analysis. This left brain is our analytical brain. Down at the back, it does analysis. It also is our linear thinking brain. It's also more of our conscious mind. This is a side that we consider the smart side of the brain. Since I was a kid, I graduated high school at 16, I started university at 17, I was told time after time, you got to read this book on math, and you got to read this book on taxes and psychology, and you got to read this book on investments, and all I did is read book after book after book with this belief that it's going to get to some level of success or some level of some design. And it does the exact opposite in our opinion. Here's the problem. Since I was a kid, this side of the brain has been glorified. This right side of the brain is what they call the lizard brain, or more of the subconscious mind. This is the side of the brain that thinks more holistically. A lot of people don't understand what the right side of the brain does because it's really not understood. It was called the subconscious mind. Well, they're starting to understand it over the last 30 years. They're doing what's called functional magnetic resonance imaging testing, fMRI tests on the brain. So what they do is they put you through a bunch of electrodes and they figure out what lights up when we decide. This center down the middle is called the corpus callosum. This center is where all the neurons transfer the fastest. On these fMRI tests, or these functional magnetic resonance testing, they're finding some really interesting things because they analyze all socioeconomic statuses of people. Poor, rich, white, black, old, men, women, everything. And so they find a really interesting thing. They find that there actually is an area called the amygdala. well, I mean, they've known that for a while, but they find that the amygdala is physiologically different in the masses than it is in the affluent. So that's a shocking discovery. So wait a minute, you're telling me the brain is different in rich than it is in poor. And they also found this in the Human Genome Project, that the brain, there's actually a God gene. There's the belief, a propensity to be more addictive, a propensity to be more gay, that kind of stuff. So they said, wait a minute, if this gene exists, what does this gene do? This is right in the amygdala. The amygdala on the left side does something, is our fear center. Has anybody heard of like fight or flight responses in animals, that kind of stuff? It's actually fight, flight, or freeze, because the left side of the brain is our negative frame. It's not negative like negative people. It's negative, they just coin it the negative side of our brain. Yet we are taught that this is the side that's going to make you rich. This left brain does fight or flight or freeze, paralysis by analysis. I don't know if you've ever walked away or missed out on a good investment opportunity. That's your left brain thinking. This right side of the brain is more of our subconscious mind, our holistic mind, and the amygdala is actually physiologically bigger in rich. It's also physiological, and they define rich as people with $3 million of liquid cash in the US. It's also physiologically bigger in sports athletes, super elite athletes. It's also physiologically bigger in leaders, on average. So then the question they go is, well, wait a minute, what does this do? What does this left amygdala do? Do you know what it does? Whoops, sorry about that. It does pattern, whoops. You know, I was in Toronto last week in front of 800 people, and this thing broke on me, so let's hope it, yeah, it is again. With pattern recognition, it does pattern recognition. What that means is the right side of our brain, our amygdala, reads people